We are live. We are live. Look at that. Look at the magic of technology. Just live. Me and Mr. Soham. I do not want to mispronounce your last name, so would you please give me proper pronunciation so I can do it the respect?
Honestly, I would love if you pronounce my
I'm a
last name
beef burger, so I
incorrectly.
taste like beef.
You try first.
Possible. I also
One
taste like
second.
beef.
Sorry. There we go. An ad just popped up in the look at me. I want to say I'm gonna take a shot and I'm gonna say Chowdhury.
That's perfect.
Really?
Honestly, that's better than because I always give like the Americanized pronunciation when people ask. So
Yeah.
I say chowder. It's like clam chowder. It's like chowder, you know.
Okay.
But it is supposed to be chowder, like you said.
Chowdhury. Okay, I thought so, but I wasn't 100% sure. And as someone whose last name is like incessantly mispronounced, I feel that pain, so I didn't want to, do you dirty like that. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, this is Valens for those who don't know. This is the former coach of Cloud9's major winning CS:GO roster. Now the director of athletics over at Evil Geniuses. Also a data scientist with a pretty steezy employment history. I guess it's fair to say. This man has featured at Tesla, Google, right? If memory serves. A Stanford graduate, if memory serves as well, right? Yeah. Just gassing you up here, just giving you the giving you the rundown.
You do all my intros, man, or what?
Yeah. So welcome to Unmuted. Thank you so much for taking the time, dude.
No, well, I mean, honestly, it's always great to talk to you, man, and I always feel honored as well to be invited to share some of my inexperience and also experience, and my pitfalls and what went great. I think those are all.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. For those who haven't seen it, we did do a feature, like a full video feature on Soham, and where we talk about his story and sort of what got him into esports and how he got here and the Cloud9 major run and everything. And it's so if you haven't seen it, it's a sick offbeat. You guys should go watch it. I wrote it. I got to interview him for it. It is sick. It's really sick. It was great. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I wanted to have you on again because I feel like right now is a very interesting time for NACS. I feel like it's an interesting time for CS. And I just, I wanted to kind of get the lowdown from one of I feel like the very few individuals who is sort of very earnestly, actively trying to build or rebuild NACS. There's on one hand you can count the number of people who are still actively invested in this, and I feel like you're one of them. So yeah, I kind of gotta ask you, man, just straight up, give it to me straight, dog. How's NACS looking these days? How is it fucked? And if so, how fucked are we talking? You know what I mean? Is it? Yeah.
I love the question. It reminds me too. I remember one of the first things we were asked right after we won Boston in those press conferences was, "What do you think this is gonna do for NACS?" I think that was one of the first questions that the entire team was asked. And I remember, I'll get back to your question, but I remember at the time we answered, or I answered, or a couple of us answered that, well, we think this is going to propel North American Counter-Strike forward. There's going to be a lot more motivation. You see that other folks from your region have just won the entire thing. That can only help, right?
Yeah.
And this was what, a little bit over 5 years ago now. And I do think it helped for sure. I do think obviously a lot more people were believing that anyone can win. Americans didn't have the greatest track history of winning championships at that time. We got close, but we never won everything. So it did help, obviously. And if you remember correctly, the biggest difference really was just there were more regional tournaments and happening back then. Pro League was still in North America. There were in the regional sections, and then we grouped up, and then we played, internationally as well. So I think the biggest difference was really leagues kind of started to be more global, no fault of their own. I mean, it makes sense, with COVID and all that they had to kind of localize and put out a better product, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the thing that I am disappointed in our region is that this like uptick of hubs, meaning like, back then it was called Rank S, Rank G on ESEA, and then, now it's FPL, FPLC. Those hubs are, I think, really, really important. I just don't think they're utilized very well by our players. And I think that's to me, what we can control is how do we actually utilize our time when we're away from our team, right? When we're not practicing with our team, what are we doing with our time? And I mean, I'm gonna ask you, man, like, how often do you see, let's say, like LeBron James
Yeah.
during a season, he's playing basketball when he's playing an actual match, when he's actually practicing, but outside of that, how much is he actually playing basketball, like playing basketball for fun in the season? The answer is like it's not often
No.
in the season, of course, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But esports is a thing. Counter Strike is no exception, where like we do what we as a profession also for fun, right? Like
Yeah.
like the practice ends. Well, what are we gonna do after we get bored that night? Most players they go back and they play more Counter Strike.
Pug.
That
Yeah.
used to be with friends and 10 mans, but now it's hubs, right?
Yeah.
So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I mean it's there's so much to unpack there, right? I remember when I was talking with Twists in it was August of 19. It was like right after Liquid had done their crazy slam run. And I remember saying to him, you have to understand, man, like you guys are making CS cool in NA. And he said to me, he's like, I never really thought of it like that. I was like, yeah, it was like when Evil Geniuses won the International in 2015, like that was a serious watershed moment for Dota in North America because like you had this group just like with C9, this group of actual all quote unquote all American, like actual locally sourced grass-fed NA roster won it all, the big one, right? And it just skyrocketed. Like it skyrocketed the game in the region. It made it so popular. Everybody looked at them and was like, holy shit, we have a team. Like we actually have a real team. We can do this, right? I could win that thing. Right? Like, and it just feels like it happens so infrequently. And it is sort of crazy to think that like Jan 18 Boston Major, right? And then like summer of 19 Liquid winning the Grand Slam, right? It actually is sort of crazy to think how close in proximity they were, all things considered, in the 20-odd year history of Counter-Strike, right? But, I mean, obviously the globalization has hurt the region. I still feel like we have the players here. I'm sure you feel the same way, considering what it is you literally do for a living and the decisions that you are making, right, over at Evil Geniuses. It just sort of feels like the infrastructure, I don't know, it's just like, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's not even a question of it's not there. On some level, obviously, it's not there. Like, obviously, in terms of volume, right, there's like 10 times as many kids in the CIS who are playing, CS, like, really seriously, 17-year-olds, 16, 18-year-olds, right? But, like, the infrastructure is in North America. It's just a question of, like, how's it being utilized, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, the infrastructure, it's not like the infrastructure has gotten worse. If anything, esports has been more legitimate. It's more legitimate. If you wanted to make it a career, it's more legitimate now than it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when NA had kind of like the peak of our success in esports, and even longer before that for Dota 2, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think the infrastructure is moving in the wrong direction. Now, we just started way behind the starting line anyway, meaning like if traditional sports is like the starting line for infrastructure, well, kids, when they're starting to play sports, they're getting coaching and mentorship from the start. They're getting like, how should we be as teammates? How should we be as people? Being good human beings are like, that stuff that they're learning before they even learn how to be a professional in any capacity, right? It's way separated. Whereas I think like in esports, it's still a lot of self-learning. It's kind of like, growing up in school, like, are you gonna have great influences around you? Like, are your friends good for you? I mean, those are things that like still apply in esports because there's no like infrastructure that early, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, there's no difference in my opinion between struggling and just just a kid in school or being online trying to play games for fun. It has very similar growth cycles there. But the part where it's like if you realize you're good, I think like you're more encouraged to be good at the game, not good as a person or as a teammate. And like if you don't learn that stuff on your own, then the cycle will continue when you eventually become a good player on a good team. So that's the cycle that I think we have control over. That I wish we spent a little bit more time in instead of focusing more on like who's gonna win this week in this hub or who controlled the most because like they don't like how this other player plays in the hub versus how they play in a scrim or a match environment, right? Like there's all these like weird things where I'm just like, this stuff didn't exist, 10 years ago, 6 years
Yeah.
ago, even that much. It was all about scrimming with your team, 10 manning with people that you found competitive, or attending events.
It feels like, and this is just a theory that I have, but I get, obviously I pug with some of these players sometimes, and like I sort of get a glimpse, like you know what I mean, into sort of the attitudes or like, so, and I'm not trying to make, I'm not even talking about like toxic attitude, just the attitudes of sort of like these players and how they play and how they pug and sort of meant right. And I have this theory that like there are certain players that came up in the infrastructure before NACS really sort of like became like really starving. A really good example of a player like this, in my opinion, is a player who's on your roster, which is Tim. There are players who came up, have been doing this for a long time, and they came up in an infrastructure that was a lot more established and a lot more burgeoning, I would say, right? Like a lot more sort of, flourishing. And it just sort of feels like there's a reason why a player like Automatic he's as solid on all the rosters that he is, right? Like regardless of age, regardless of like, switching games, regardless, like he has a fucking mental, he has a regime, he has obviously skill, like obviously talent, but like he has a system within himself. Like the guy is just insane. I mean, this is the reason, like, hashtag free Tim has been on, like, every roster Tim has ever been on. A coworker and I were joking about this the other day, right? Like, Tim has never played for a roster in his whole career that people haven't said, like, yo, this guy's too good for that roster. Like, he's so good, man. He's just so solid. Like, he's so crazy, right? Like, and I just feel like players these days, it's tough. You know what I mean? Like, players like Twists, Elige, Naf, Tim, even some of the players who are not playing competitively anymore, Stu, Tarek, right? Like, they came up in infrastructures that it feels like were a lot more, it was, I don't know, like not easier to become established, but like, cause they worked really hard. Right. But it's just like, it just feels like these days kids are sort of, they just have pugs and nothing else. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think like the main difference really is that it's encouraged. Whether it's okay, encouraged may not be the right word. I think it's incentivized. Actually,
yeah.
It's more incentivized now to do things to make money as quick as possible in the esports sphere. And I think like probably every industry that's like kind of maturing goes through this because like people are like starting now enough people have examples to look around and see like, hey, like this player Rops made it from like face it to pro scene. Wow. Boros made it to the face it to the pro scene. That's interesting. There's a lot of examples like that now. Even like Stewie, like you said, he became, went from the pug star to a championship winner, right? I mean, there's like so many examples of this now that you can look around whatever region you're from and be like, wait, I know someone. I feel like I know someone that has been successful and they did it like pretty quickly. I can probably do that too. And if I don't do that, then I'm not going to be successful. I'm going to be considered a failure. Because now more people around you, your friends, your peer group, your maybe family, as well, they see like, if you don't become successful relatively quickly, then why are you doing this? You should have a backup plan, right? I mean, and so like there's more pressure. And so in my opinion, that's why like these incentives for like these hubs where you can make money, where these, streaming where you can make money, obviously, those things become more like, you're quicker to gravitate towards that versus grinding and playing team Counter-Strike. I don't blame them because at the end of the day, like if you're reaching the age where you should be in college otherwise, or you should be doing something that's like full-time work oriented otherwise, like you're reaching kind of like your late teens, early 20s, that kind of age range, it is definitely worthwhile for you to think like, should I actually be doing this as my career if you haven't quote unquote made it by then? There's a lot of like, it's a lot of internal struggles there, right? Because I mean, people had made it in their mid 20s. You had some late bloomers in the professional scene. Jax, Roger, or however you want to say it. There's a ton of examples where in your mid 20s, late 20s, I mean, look at Kerrigan, Glaive, these older in-game leaders that are finding the most success now. Hooksy, for example, as well. They're all older.
Yeah.
So, what is it age? Should I stop if I'm not good enough? The thing that people forget is those players that I just mentioned were also good in their teens. It's not like they started
Bro.
doing this thing in their mid 20s, right? So the grind happened at some point. They didn't just skip the grind. So I'll pause there again.
Nitro was
Nitro
a
is, yeah,
cracked entry fragger when he was
yeah,
like he was a
totally different player.
steezy rifle. Exactly, he was a liege, bro. He was so fucking good. Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much we could talk about with this. Obviously, I guess my question for you is like brass tacks. Obviously, like you're right. Look, 5 years ago, the goal for a kid like Stewie, you know what I mean, like win the major, like that's, and of course on some level that's like still obviously the goal of a lot, but like now it's sort of like, well, I mean, should I win the major or like should I just have a big Twitch stream? Because like having a big Twitch stream sounds pretty fucking sick. It's gonna make me a shit ton more money. It's more sustainable long term. It's a better career decision. Like it's not just that it's the easy way out or anything like that. It's actually like sort of from a sustainability standpoint, it actually sort of makes more sense, right? To just do that. But then it throws esports into this sort of crisis, right? This like crisis of faith or existential crisis or whatever, right? Which is like, what are these kids really practicing for, right? Like, are the Tenses of the world, like, are they trying to get good so they can win a title, or are they trying to get good so that they can become a sick content creator and have a great stream and get tons of sponsorships and right, people love them and what, etc., right? And I don't know, I mean, there's not really an easy answer for it. It's sort of weird, and I think that in NA it's probably a little more, the creator thing is probably a little bit more sort of like in the large. I think in Europe, I don't know if Bit, whose rookie year in Pro Counter-Strike, he's like literally one of the greatest in the history of the sport. I mean, the guy was a top 3 rifler in the world in his rookie year, right? I don't know if he ever had the fucking dream of like, well, like maybe I'll have a Twitch stream, or like I want to be a big streamer, make a lot. I don't know. That dude strikes me as being like 18 and just being like, no, I'm gonna win a fucking major, dude. Like I'm here to play team Counter-Strike. I'm here to fucking play the best of the best in the world, and right and the infrastructure exists, obviously, for him to sort of, now he is an exception. He is sort of a unicorn, but yeah, it's a deep subject. And I guess my brass tacks question for you is like, CS2, right? I think people are pretty hopeful that it could change a lot in North America specifically. You know what I mean? It could kind of get the game big again. And I don't know. What do you think, man? Like to put it. I know it's like sort of hard to answer in these sort of reductive terms, but like, do you think that CS2 can? I don't want to say save, but like, do you think it can revitalize NACS in a real way, like a way that actually matters?
Yeah, it definitely will. Whenever there's a shiny new thing, there's going to be a lot more players who come into the game early. Probably will get some of the players that are also, they started with Valorant. Like they were never CS players, right? But now they're like, Valorant's been out for a few years. Let me try out CS2. It's going to be a new game, equal playing field for the new players coming in. That's an incentive in and of itself. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of don't realize, but the reason there was a lot of migration between CS to Valorant a few years ago in the first place was that you had a lot of players in the semi-pro and below kind of region that they were like, we're not going to catch up to the pro scene right now. Like we've tried, we're not catching up quick enough. There's not enough spots to actually join these pro teams. Why don't I join a game that I have more of a chance to succeed? That's not a bad problem to have in the esports scene. Like maybe it was bad for Counter-Strike for a few years, and when it comes to like the pool of players, but it's just gonna happen in reverse now with CS2, right? It's a new thing. Players that are in Valorant, they're gonna also feel like, hey, like some of them, they're not gonna have reached the top, or they could have reached the top, or they feel like they should be able to reach the top, but there's not enough spots. I think there's a lot of social media discussions around that in and of itself right now, and it's just gonna happen in reverse. And it's bouncing back and forth between the best games, in this case FPS games that are out there, that will happen. I think that's good for competition. It's good for both Valve and Riot in different ways. It's just, are you trying to be the best game developer by the end of this year, or by the end of this decade, or by the end of next decade? Like, it just depends. Like, what's your goal as a developer, right? So if you have a long enough time horizon, I really think that this kind of back and forth competition between Counter-Strike and Valorant, but who knows, maybe there's a new FPS game that's going to come out in the future, tactical FPS, I should say, that also is a competitor. That's actually good for competition. It's good for players. There's going to be more opportunities, good for organizations, and it's good for the developers as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I've been saying this for the last little while, right? Which is like, there's no reason that CS2 can't do what Valorant did. Like, we both remember what happened when Valorant came out. You know, casually, CS2 was really under serviced. It's not a secret that CS2 or CS, like CSGO, started getting like a lot more popular and like content updates when Valorant sort of started eating its lunch. Valve were on a fucking throne for, 15 years or whatever, right? And like nobody really challenged them, and they got a little complacent. Let's just call a spade, right? They got a little complacent, and Valorant came along, and CS was like, oh shit, we gotta oh yeah, capitalism, damn. we gotta up our game a little bit, literally, right? No, you're right, yeah. And I think the question of like to what extent is really interesting. I mean, it's obvious, it's super awesome to see, some of the streamers come back, Tim doing case unboxings and playing CS, right? And like seeing guys like, Summit has sort of always obviously been a CS OG, but it's great to see streamers coming back, and I'm seeing Nick Merckx is doing fucking case unboxings. I'm seeing him stacking with Courage and Tim and Dr. Disrespect, and I'm like, this is important. This is really important for like 14-year-olds out there, right? Who were like 11 when Valorant came out, right? And like they are not really seriously invested in either game, right? And they're sort of just like playing what's popular, right? And I'm with you. No, it could be. I don't think it's copium, man. I don't think it's copium to just say like, CS2 could be big, actually big, like really big in North America, and change, change the fates of Counter-Strike in this continent.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a reach to say that at all. In fact, like I love the fact that what it does at the minimum is it just shows like if like a lot of this is right timing, right? For example, like when people got good in CSGO, it was around that 2012, 2013 range that they started to play this game. They grinded. Why? Well, they also had to be in a position in their life, the stage in their life where they could grind, right? They potentially, if all the players that just came full-time employees somewhere because 2012 was they're just finishing college and they're just grinding the work life, they might have missed out on grinding Counter-Strike, CSGO. And I think this is kind of what I see with some of the late bloomers as well, is like if the timing of a new release of a game kind of syncs up with where you can take a break or grind the game, you should do it. Yeah. If you have a competitive drive, obviously. I'm not saying, throw away money or whatever you have going on for grinding a game, but at the same time, if you have that luxury and you've had that competitive drive, you should do it. And I was in that category, to be honest. This is why I'm speaking about it. It's 2012. I had just finished my Stanford grad degree, so I'm done with school. 6 years of school, did my bachelor's, did my master's, and I'm like, wow, 2012, I never got to actually try to go pro in CS 1.6 or before. I played it, enjoyed the game, learned how to code on that game as well, which, we can ignore that topic for a sec, but CSGO, when it came out, timing was right. For a lot of people, CS2, the timing is going to be right. For Valorant, when it came out, timing was right. So try to find those. If you have this competitive drive and you're in the situation where you can take a little bit of a break or prioritize your time properly so you can try to see how good you can get, you should do it. You'll regret not at least trying.
I feel like for those of you who don't follow Soham on Twitter and you do have that competitive edge, you should. It's a great follow. The man's phenomenal, like sports science and sports psychology tweets. I genuinely find really insightful. Like I really, really like thinking about
Thanks,
actual, man. I mean it, like actual team Counter-Strike. Obviously, I'm 30, my going pro days, aspirations, far as they were, are long behind me, but I still play the game seriously. And so I really enjoy thinking about the way you sort of challenge people to think about the game. But I do have a question for you, because this is something I really wanted to pick your brain about. There's often so much talk about, people who play CS tend to play the game very seriously. That's just sort of the type of game it is now. It's one of those games where like 80% of people play this game are like sweats. Like they really try hard, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the advice we give is for players who are already like good or great at the game, but are trying to get to that point of like, I'm fucking sick. Like I'm really good. What is your advice or tips or just like sort of because I get this question all the time, dude, all the time, and I really strongly feel that this is a player base of Counter-Strike that gets left behind, which is actual new players who are actually just trying to like get into the game, and they think that it's very gatekeepy, and they think it's very hard, and they think it's really complicated, and they don't really understand a lot of stuff. And I feel like, you know, we sort of just say like, oh, you know, go watch War Owl or Voo, and like that's good advice. But like you look at some of these, like just some of these videos are like not 8, 9 years old. You know what I mean? Like it feels like there's not really anybody out there who's like really trying to get like, you know, actual new players into Counter Strike, make them feel welcome, make them feel supported, right? I know it's kind of a big question, but like sort of what is your tip as someone who is very insightful to already established players, right? Do you have any tips for people who are trying to get into Counter Strike?
Great question. There's a few different ways I would say I would tackle it. One is you have to first understand, do you actually enjoy playing this game because you like what the game offers, or it's just because you have this vision of what it'll feel like when you're great. And I think this applies to not just like Counter Strike, but whatever you do in life, right? Like if you do something or if you start something because you're already thinking about the finish line, most likely you're not going to finish. You're not going to get there. There are going to be exceptions, obviously, but I think like if I'm speaking to, you know, the majority of folks that will be watching this at some point or listening right now, I really feel like the very first high level filter is, do you actually enjoy playing this game even when you lose?
Yeah.
Even when you are getting yelled at, even when you are yelling at someone else. I mean, do you enjoy this game for what it is? That's number one. And if that answer is yes, first of all, you're already now filtering down to a much less number of people if you've passed that first stage. After that, I think it's like, okay, like, what are you good at naturally? Like, first, do you enjoy the game? But second is like, what are you good at naturally? Most people will have this two separate categories here. One is like they're good mechanically, like they get the feel of the game, whether it's coming from other FPS games or other movement-heavy games like Unreal Tournament, Quake, and whatnot. You might love the movement, you might love the mechanics of the gunplay, and that's great. You might naturally be better at those things. Fine, like keep that in your mind for a sec. But the second category is that you really enjoy the game, because remember, you passed this first level filter, right? And maybe your mechanics aren't the greatest, but you really enjoy setting other people up that do have great mechanics. And now you're starting to understand, okay, you're already thinking about roles and like some people are better at one thing and some people are better at another. If you're already thinking like that, and while playing, you're noticing like, oh, I want to set my players up like this, that are my teammates up, even in this pug, even in this 10-man, even if this, you know, scrim with my team in open. If you're thinking like that already, which, you know, you'll be surprised a lot of people will get to that point early in their career, that's fine too. You should double down on that as well. But if you're in the second category, don't forget, keep working on your mechanics too, because at the end of the day, this isn't a game where you can be supportive only, right? There are 5 players on the server on each team. You do need to be able to get your kills. Your aim has to be pretty decent. Don't forget about it, but just know that you have an added advantage. For example, I'll use our team, EG Black, formerly known as EG Black. Now they're just EG. Walco is the first in-game leader from North America. To think about this, the first North American IGL in years that has actually made it to the pro scene. Correct me, you know, fact check me.
No.
The
Right.
first North American.
JT's not North American.
North American.
Nitro
right?
is an
Nitro
OG.
came back.
Yeah,
Yes.
OG. Yeah.
Obviously, Kendar now he's not North American.
No, you're right.
Complexity, like you said, JT.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have a lot of tier 2 semi-pro teams that do have North American IGLs. I get it. But I'm talking about pro scene consistently on the circuit. Walco is the first player in a long time that's North American that's become an IGL. There is a shortage.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, I mean, nothing against the current IGLs that are on the teams we just mentioned, but I guarantee you, if you were more supportive and you stood out in a role like Jax as an entry, or you stood out as an IGL in North America, and I'm not saying in terms of your in-game skills, but also how you talk with people, you know, your reputation, how you carry yourself on social media, all of that above, you can also make it and not be the best mechanically gifted player, right? So those are the 2 buckets. I'll stop at those 2 stages for now, but if you can't pass those 2 stages, enjoy the game, and then which bucket are you in right now, I would say that then, you know, play this game for fun. This is on option 2. It's a game at the end of the day, right? Like there's a ton of people that play baseball, basketball, football, soccer for fun too. But if you are trying to go pro, make sure you at least pass those first 2 stages.
Okay, that's good advice. Yeah, look, I love throwing smokes. Like I always joke with my ESEA team. Like I'm just here to throw smokes. Like I actually think my mechanics are not bad. Like my mechanics are actually pretty good. But
You're
I
pretty good, man. I've seen you play.
oh well, thank you. That's from a major winner. That's very sweet. But I no, but I love playing support. Like it's like the thing. Like to me, you know the adrenaline you get when you just like fucking wreck somebody with an AK. It's like the dopamine hit. You know what I mean? The one for me is when I throw a swanky god flash, like a great flash. I hear the bang, and then I just hear my teammate wreck that guy, and I see it in the corner, and he just goes, good flash, bro. And that for me is the that's why I'm here, you know what I mean? Like that's what gets me going. Like I love that feeling, and I think more players should lean into that. Like that's a great, really invaluable, man. Like I play some 2400 elo face and pugs, and guys are dropping me smokes on fucking Anubis or Ancient because they're like, I don't know, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. You know what I mean? I got a 24 average, 25 average kills, but I don't know this lineup or I don't know that lineup or like, yeah, no, it's a thing. Hard segue for a man who did reach the finish line. Speaking of, I was gonna ask you, which is because it came up recently. I saw a discussion. I actually can't for the life of me remember where it was Reddit. I can't remember. Discussion of the Stew graffiti. The subject always comes up. And now at the end of CSGO, because we're actually at the end of the game, right? We sort of will not have any more graffitis added to the game because we will not have any more majors for CSGO. So, I gotta ask you, as a man who won that major, who's on that team, right? The Stewie graffiti at the end of CSGO's lifespan. What is sort of the final tally, the final reckoning? Should the Inferno clutch, should it have gotten a graffiti or not?
Obviously, the answer is yes. It should get a graffiti. The funniest thing about that entire sequence is that like after Skadoodle, Skadaddy, whatever you want to call him, after Ska, our team didn't have a secondary opper. Like, it's whoever wants to pick it up can pick it up. And it's just funny because I remember leading into, like, scrims leading into, our major run and all that in Boston. Like, sometimes Tim was picking up the op, sometimes Stu was picking up the op, sometimes Tark was picking up the op. And the only one who really didn't op was, like, Rush. So we had 3 secondary oppers. So I'm pretty sure what was going through Stu's mind in that moment, and I can't remember if I asked him, but what was probably going through his mind is like, you know what? Like, these guys are going so slow. They're afraid of, like, actually committing to a bomb site early. I'm just going to late round up, and, like, I'll get my shots. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Kerrigan has talked about this a lot, and obviously a ton of respect for Kerrigan. Yeah. The one thing that he wasn't understanding in that moment was why were we playing so passive on CT side? Because we're also we have Tarek, we have Stu, we have automatic, yeah. Right? Like, we were known as like, we're making a play. You just gotta wait us out. We're gonna make a play, and you can then either die to us or you can try killing us, right? But we stopped doing that for the last like 9 rounds or 7 rounds or whatever it was, and it really threw him off. And that's where the op play kind of came in for Stu, and he had that crazy, backside moment. So yes, it should be a graffiti, and just some context on, how we arrived to that moment.
No, that's really helpful. We love stuff like that. That's it. And you're right? Like, it's sort of these are all guys in NACS that I would consider to be, maybe save Naf, who I think is like the only outlier of a great NA secondary opper. Some of the best, like Tim is a extraordinary secondary opper. Stu, extraordinary secondary opper, right? Obviously, Skadoodle, arguably or inarguably the greatest North American opera of all time, right? But yeah, no, it's and Tarek, obviously Tarek. I mean, that op clutch of Tarek's, the one where he kept telling Tim, don't peek, right? Like the 1v3 so again. Funny. Dude, that play was fucking woo.
Just I know this is not a question, but imagine you're Tarek, right? And this is like a make or break moment in the game, and you still have the presence of mind to communicate to your teammate while going for a peek. Like, let me play. You in the clutch. And guess what, guys? Like, tying this back into the 2 stages I was talking about, Tarek understood very early on in his career that his mechanics and his aggression and how he can, surprise people with his playstyle is his strong suit. So he never really wanted to be in clutches. So even in that moment, major, huge round, I think it was like in double OT or whatever it was. he's saying like, let me play. I don't want to. He's not saying this, but he's thinking, I don't want to be in the clutch. Let me just fight first. You be in the clutch. You're better in that moment. But then he just kills everyone, right? So, but it's just a great kind of like connection of you recognize what you're good at, and then you put it into action in the biggest moment possible.
You can see it. You can see Tim, because obviously it's a high pressure, the most high pressure of their careers, right? Like you can see Tim sort of edging, like on the like, and Tarek just be like, don't be like, you don't need to, and because Tim wants to help, like he wants to trade, he wants to help, but he's just telling him like, don't, just trust me, just fucking all tab out. Go on Twitter, like just wait. Like it's such a special moment. It was such a sick play. Yeah, I was gonna ask you actually if you thought, obviously losing Tarek, and Stu now more recently, two creators, obviously very happy for them. Like I still really enjoy watching Tarek. I just love him as a creator. He's just such a funny guy. So, but I do miss watching him play CS, obviously, and rarely he does. But I was gonna ask you, just sort of as someone who sort of not only knows them personally, but knows them sort of like their competitive drive, you know what I mean? And I feel like the answer is probably a little bit different for these two guys, but something that's been talked about recently is like Stewie and, whether he'll ever come back to CS and sort of, you know what I mean? He has obviously himself teased it a little bit. That's one of the reasons I think why it's sort of, but I have, and this is just me fucking speculating. Like I don't know Stewie from Adam. I've actually never interacted with him, but I get the feeling that he is one of those guys who is like earth-endingly competitive. Like he strikes me as one of these guys who is like literally like, it's not funny, it's not a joke, it's not fun for him. It's like one of those things that is like in his fucking genome. Like he is just, and if he can't do it the right way, he won't do it at all. Like that's sort of and I'm just sort of psychologizing the boy here, but that's sort of the impression I get. Like if he's not gonna play CS on the major fucking stage, then he's not even gonna stream it for fun. Because like what's the point? Like why even, right? And I'm curious, as someone who, has had real serious in the trenches competitive experience with him, if you think that there is a chance that we'll see him, make a return to competitive CS.
I would be very surprised if he didn't come back to CS2 at some point. I have no idea if that's going to be early or if it's going to be late, or maybe he's already playing and no one knows. Like a lot. I mean, who knows, right? I would be very surprised if he didn't at least give it a shot. And it's not because he couldn't become great at Valorant if he wants to. It's more to me like he is always going to naturally vibe with Counter-Strike a little bit more because he knows he's had success with it, which allows him to go through like the struggles of coming back if he wanted to. Yeah. Because he knows he can. He knows he can get back to the top. It was a very similar thing with Automatic. I mean, he took a year off, but I mean, he was playing competitively. It was just Valorant. But when he came back to CS, he knew he was going to return to form eventually. And it's not because he expected to, it's because he knew he was going to put in the work. His process has always led him to success. So similarly for Stu, his process, like you mentioned, he's hyper competitive. I think for him, he has 2 gears. He has one of the fastest abilities to reset from being annoyed that I've ever seen. Meaning, like, he could be annoyed for a full game, okay? And then the game ends, and he high fives. He's like, "Yo, let's go let's go outside. Let's go grab something to eat." And like, if you've never interacted with someone with that type of personality, you'll find that jarring, right? Like if you never like got yelled at in practice, and then practice ends and you go do something with your friend, it's not your teammate anymore, right? It'll be jarring. And I think that's something that Stu kind of had to figure out as he was growing up. Other teammates had to figure out as they were growing up too, that like, wait, it is possible for my teammate to be very, very competitive, very passionate, very demanding, and then the game ends and we're not like that. Now, one thing I will give credit to Stu a lot is that it's not that he wanted to surround himself with people that he didn't think could cut it, which is now this is the issue that a lot of people have even in the NA scene, is like, if you are hyper competitive, super passionate, super demanding, you could get tilted, you could get annoyed. Well, if you're not aware of the fact that, like, are you keeping people around because they can put up with that, or are you keeping people around because they're actually competitive similar to you? You have to be able to make that distinction.
Yeah.
And obviously earlier in your career the better, because otherwise you're going to be surrounded with people that are just like scared. And this is not what happened with Stu, thankfully, but it could have happened with Stu.
I always got that impression, and then just again, this is just me psychologizing to some degree, but from team chemistry. But I always got that impression to some degree with Liquid, with one of the reasons they were so successful at their peak, at their height. I honestly got the impression, genuinely got the impression that these guys, some of them obviously have like very long-standing friendships, like obviously Nitro and Elish, like, you know, they go way back, right? But like, I don't know if these guys even, I'm just to be callous for a second, I don't know if these guys liked each other. I don't know if they really, but I think that they understood as players what they all did really well, and they were just hyper fucking competitive, and they gelled and they trusted each other in the server, and they were willing to be sacrificial. They believed in each other, right? Somebody dropped Twists a deagle on a hero deagle on a force buy. They would say like, I honestly believe you hit these bangers. And Stu would lay down his life on the line all the time and say, I'll get info over here, or I'll sack, or I'll fucking die with my knife out, you know what I mean, running up mid Inferno just to get intel, just because I believe you guys. Like they just had such a server chemistry that I felt like, but in terms of personal relationships, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I never got the impression these guys actually really liked each other. They just, you know, were very, very good, right, as professionals. Yeah.
First of all, I love that you're thinking along these lines, because these are like real questions that I think that sometimes, as even their peers, but also fans for sure, we forget like what does it actually take to be a professional. And it's not the same as everyone having to get along and be friends. It's really not. I mean, how many times have you all worked in a setting where you do great work, your team is super productive, you're part of a super productive team, whatever you're doing, whether it's working in the service industry, working in IT, whether it's in tech, doesn't matter, finance, you could be extremely productive, and, you know, work ends, 5 p.m. hits or whatever it is for you, and you don't interact with your coworkers until the next day at work. That's normal. That's the normal, right? I would say it's out of the norm if you have a really close relationship with your coworkers. But it seems like it's normal because we're in this digital kind of esports landscape. Everyone's streaming, everyone's having fun. There's social media, there's Instagram posts, everyone's being happy. There's Twitter posts, X posts of things that are just, it seems great. And it is great for a lot of it. But at the end of the day, this is still work. This is your profession. You need to have a certain level of, you know, you can't be complacent, essentially. You can't be complacent yourself. You also can't be complacent in terms of who you have around you as teammates. Yeah. And I think like that in and of itself shouldn't breed friendship. If it does, that's great. Yeah. But it's not a requirement, right? So I think like, yes, for culture, and also like with the advent of like sports psychology coming into esports and Counter-Strike, especially, some people thought that, hey, we need to have a great culture, which means everyone needs to get along. Who defined that? Who defined that as great culture to begin with, right? I can argue that great culture could be that there's mutual respect with everyone. If someone has an idea, you hear them out. You don't have to agree with it. You hear them out. Yeah. And then the best ideas filter up and become what ends up happening in the team. Like that to me is a great culture. And you don't have talking behind the back and all this kind of stuff. See, none of what I just said though, there means that it equals or results in great friendships. It can. Yeah. But it's not a requirement. And I think like, it's I wouldn't be surprised, to go back to your question, if some of the best teams in the world, Virtus Pro, you know, in their Polish scene, Team Liquid Grand Slam run, C9 Boston run, the Brazilian teams, I'm sure most of them were not super close with each other all the time.
It happens. You get the, like, what I think is fair to say, and obviously this is just public perception, like, we obviously, to your point, we don't know. Like, we obviously don't know. But the FaZe Clan, the current FaZe Clan, like, they've been pretty open about the fact that they are, like, you know, I think that they forged, like, Twists and Rops are a good example. I think they forged a friendship with each other that, like, honestly, probably neither of them anticipated. Like, they probably didn't think they were going to get that, become like brothers and become that close. That's great. If it happens, it's great. It is. It can engender a level of, like, you know, camaraderie, right? But you sure as shit don't need it. Like Kobe and Shaq famously, like, didn't like each other, right? Like they but they were together. The Shake and Bake was the most unstoppable duo in ball, right? In basketball, like it was. Speaking of, I want to be respectful of your time, so I kind of want to get through a few more questions. One thing I was going to ask you is, I've never heard you really talk on it. I'm so curious. I am a big Zywoo fanboy. Huge Zywoo fanboy. I fucking personally, I really love him. He's a very friendly guy. I've always had great interactions with him. He's a lovely human being. But I think that the way that dude plays CS is just like, I think he's the best player in the world right now. Not to say the best of all time in CS:GO, but I think he's the best player in the world right now. I think that just pound for pound, the guy is he's on one right now. Like he's at a high that it feels really, really, really good for him. But what I was going to ask you is the sort of eternal great Titan v Titan, Flash versus Jaedong rivalry between Simple and Zywoo. From someone who is such an erudite thinker about the game, at a really scientific level, or I should say mechanical level, but not necessarily mechanics per se, just like the way the game is played. Simple versus Zywoo. Sort of, what is your take on who the greater player is right now in terms of legacy? I'm just curious. I'm curious on sort of, as someone who studies the game as deeply as you do, what you make of these two obviously unicorns, each a unicorn, each a goat in their own right, can do things that just absolutely no other human being in the world can do. I'm curious your take.
Yeah, I mean, both of those players they're generational, obviously, both Simple and Zywoo. I think it's cool for us to see, as, like I said, peers, but also fans of the game, that two very different people can be great.
Yeah.
At not even great, actually, elite, like the best of the best of the best, right? Like it's really cool that like Simple has obviously his personality and how he plays the game, and it can be successful. And then you have Zywoo, who's always, it's seemingly that he's always having fun. He's always like laughing in the game, out of game. He's always like bubbly. He's always like bouncing up and down. Like, I'm like, how's this guy a professional in terms of just like does he have the mental? And then you see him just destroy everyone in the game, right? So you have like two very clear distinctions of GOATs, or you can have that discussion at least, in terms of different types of personalities and playstyle. What's interesting to me is that I think that Simple has probably more demanding in terms of, I think he has more demands in terms of how a team should be and how we should play.
Yeah.
And Zywoo is more like, hey, just throw me in whatever. I'm going to just do my best, man. And his best is oftentimes the best in the server, right? There's two different ways. So if you were trying to build a team and you need a defining player, I would say Simple is better. If you want to build a team and you have a great leader already who knows exactly how they want to do things, Apex, right? Zonic as a coach, Zywoo is better. Like, I don't think putting Simple in Vitality and Zywoo in Navi is great, to be honest. Like, so to me, this is like going back to a question of like, the best players may be the worst players in different settings, different environments. And it's the same with coaches, the same with star players in one team, but not another. Look, for example, what's happening to IM in Navi. He was the star player clearly for Gamer Legion, right? Yeah. Leading in their major run, and like he was destroying, and like, so what happened? Is it that he became a worse player? No, it's in a different setting. There's different types of things you can't have your strong suits in every team. So to me, it's really about, do you want someone who is able to define the team? Then Simple is the GOAT. If you want someone who can just play and be versatile no matter what, rifle, opping, pistols, whatever, Zywoo is the GOAT. So I'm obviously being reductive, as you mentioned, but yes. Those are the two ways I would see it.
I interviewed Shox on our last episode of Unmuted Scene, and we were talking about Zywoo, obviously, as ex-teammates, and Shox was almost frustrated. It was like beautiful. He was just like, he doesn't care. He doesn't know where he is. Like, seriously, he's like, social media, like Twitter, HLTV. He's like, he's oblivious to all of it. He doesn't care. And he said, what's so amazing, not to belabor, but what's so amazing about Zywoo, and Shock said, is that he's untiltable. He said he has this beautiful water flowing over the rock idea of Counter-Strike, where, I flashed behind red, I swung, I thought he'd be secret, there was intel, there was a one-way. There was a crack of a one-way. I got opt through the one-way. Happens. Like, what could I have done? Nothing I could have done. He doesn't get tilted. He doesn't lose his shit. You can see with Simple sometimes. Like, Simple, as you say, has this very prescriptive, perfectionist idea of how the game has to unfold. And like Shock said, Zywoo just, fuck. I missed. Sorry, guys. You know what I mean? Like, I thought he was AZN. He was Mustang. Oh, sorry. You know what I mean? Like, it happens. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and that's beautiful. Obviously, that's an extremely healthy way to approach a hard and frustrating and unforgiving and difficult game like Counter-Strike, right? Which can be
You know what though, Dimitri, is that what's interesting to me is like it's a beautiful way to approach it, but you can't have too many people that approach it like that in one team. And I think that's to me that is the ultimate beauty of like team based, in this case tactical FPS. Like Counter Strike is like you actually don't want too many. You don't want all five people that are just like whatever, all good. No matter what happens, all good. Like we're not giving up participation awards to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't have an entire team like that. At the same time, you can't have an entire team full of as soon as something goes wrong that is out of your control, everyone is reacting negatively, right? You want that balance, and I think that's the part that like when team building is happening, and I've had this experience now for the last full year, like team building, being a general manager, so to speak. That's the type of stuff that like no one, and I don't blame outside perspectives, but no one knows exactly what type of balance you need in your team because no one's really seeing the players out of a, stream mode, cameras on you environment to begin with, right? But you definitely don't want players to have the same type of personalities or reactions to the good or the bad, too many of them on one team.
No, you're right. Like I'm thinking even of like Stewie and Naf, like two guys who could not be more different in terms of how they react to. You need both. It's like the rule in cooking. You need to cut the fat with an acid. You know what I mean? Like you can't have too much of one or the other. You need the two, right? You need that yin and yang, right? Yeah. The last thing I was going to ask you actually is about. I mean, I had a few more questions, but again, I want to be respectful of your time. So, CS2 and the strategic depth of the game. I have this feeling, and I think all of us have this feeling, that we sort of kind of have a vague idea of like, oh man, these smoke changes are like a pretty big deal. Like they're gonna, probably change the way Counter-Strike is played. But like the game will change, I think, quite a lot. And I think that we probably have yet to really even understand in any way, you know what I mean? How could we, right? How deeply it will change CS. And I'm curious, like, what you think. Like, do you think that these changes are just sort of like the sort of like the natural progression of any esport? You know what I mean? Like esports game developers tend to make them a little bit more complicated and sophisticated over time. Or do you think that this is like really a like moment, right, for CS where like really it's gonna just actually completely fucking change how Counter-Strike is played?
I want to go to the psychology of the game developers here. I mean, knowing Valve a little bit, they've done a great job keeping the essence of Counter-Strike for many, many, many years, right? I think you can argue maybe with some hiccups here or there for Source, which changed the feel of the game. Yeah. For the most part, though, in Counter-Strike's history, the 20-plus year history, the essence of the game has been pretty similar. So I would be surprised if like some of these like game breaking things like shadows are appearing like from like 50 feet out because of the lighting and the crazy lighting effects of Swords too. Like I'd be surprised if those kinds of things stay in the game for too long, or at least by the time it's a competitive game and events are using it. Same thing with smokes. If at some point, I think they already reduced how big the holes are when you're shooting through the smoke, for example, right? Yeah. I don't think it's going to be game changing or game breaking. Of course, it's going to be changing the game. But hey, look, if you want to have dedicated HE grenades meant for breaking a smoke wall up, and that's how you're going to use your HE, fine. Now as a T, I know that I'm not going to get HE somewhere else. So this dynamic, that's what we don't know how the ping pong effect will actually happen. But of course, like you can't just if you use an HE for something, you're not going to be able to use it for something else. If you're going to be spending resources spamming a gun to see holes through a smoke, well, now I know where one of your players are. Yeah. So I think that's the beauty of Counter-Strike is like, the game is going to change for sure. But at the same time, when that changes, it's not like a turn-based role-playing game here. So as you're changing that, I'm trying to figure out how to counter what you're doing. Yeah. Right? So I think that's going to be the fun part is how to see the back and forth. But in terms of the essence of the game, knowing Valve, I really feel like they're going to do a good job keeping the game feel similarly. So this change between CSGO and CS2, I think, is much, much, much less different overall than from Source to CSGO.
Oh, 100%. Oh God, yeah. But that's really but that's also because like the continuity. Like I'm with you. Like I'm a rare NA player who actually was a 1.6er. Like I played
Yeah.
Source, but I hated Source. I was like, this game is, I don't like this. Like, it's fun to meme in, it's fun to like fuck around it, but other than that, it's like not serious. So for me, the continuity is really from 1.6 to go. And obviously, if you look at 1.6 to go, there's a lot more continuity. But do you think that actually the difference between, I realize it's sort of hard to say because like there was fucking Jesus, right? Like 14 years, 13 years in between 1.6 and Global Offensive. But do you think that the change between 1.6 and Global Offensive was more drastic than the change between CSGO and CS2?
Yes. Yeah, I do. And that's only because like there's so many ways that you can identify what's happening around you in CSGO that 1.6 never had. Like radars and like, I mean, people don't even remember anymore, but like you couldn't see equipment on your teammates. You couldn't keep track of like what's going on the buy in the buy time. You didn't know LeBron lost bonus. Like I mean you did, but like you didn't see it graphically. Like there's a lot that just was not happening. I mean radars were just like it's just a green. I think it was like the maps came later in 1.6 in your mini map. Like before it was just like a green blob. There's a lot that just was not it wasn't as easy to pick up the game and learn how to get good. And CSGO changed that dramatically, especially to the state it is in now. CS2 is not making those types of changes, and if it does, it's things like, the buy menu is cleaner. It's easier to drop weaponry. Like, thank you Valorant, right, for great ideas like that. But to me, I don't think it's going to be as big of a change. The mechanics, literally, Valve is saying they're trying to make it the movement and the gunplay as close to CSGO as possible. Like they already have this in their mind. So I think just by definition and by where their mentality is about CS2, it can't be as big of a change between Go and CS2 as it was between 1.6 and Go.
Yeah, no, that's I agree. I tend to think I'm one of these like real curmudgeonly like only. I still wish that Go felt as good as 1.6 did. I still think that 1.6 in terms of shooting and movement. Actually, it's really movement. I feel like the movement of 1.6 was goated. I think Rops has said something similar. It still feels the best out of all of them, but hopefully CS2 will. I don't know. It's a hot take, but I kind of actually think the movement in CSGO could have used a little work. I know it's like a really hot take, but Anyway, I will, unless you want to reify my hot take, maybe I'll have somebody else who feels that 1.6 was still the go.
I love 1.6, man, but to me, I actually think from a spectator perspective, experience, and look, even pro players and coaches, we're watching the game a lot, right? Yeah. So spectator experience matters a lot. Like watching from a spectator, watching demos, and like, man, seeing crouch hopping across the map, like ridiculous movement happening, no matter how cool it felt to play. I'm just like, how do I go back to my team and be like, we lost this round because this guy just outmaneuvered you the entire round? Like, so like getting strategic side of things and actually using your mind and like be more data driven, data informed. I think CS:GO, I'm a bigger fan than 1.6, but not because 1.6 didn't have goated movement. I have to give it that, of course. But in terms of like actually being more scientific and the better team should win and like how do you approach team building and strategy and anti-strategy, I think CSGO is miles better. And CS2 should carry that legacy onwards too.
I agree. It's a good place to call it too. I feel that there's also obviously 100 million quality of life things that 1.6 did not have that CS2 did better. Like buying ammo. I went back to play. I still play 1.6 from time to time. And I was like, oh my god, I have to buy ammo, dude. Like it's so like right. Yeah. But no, there are things about it that I still wish were sort of preserved a little better. And who knows? Maybe they will. And honestly, in CS2, maybe they will. But because Valorant did. Valorant actually feels a lot closer to 1.6 to me than it feels to people keep saying it's a CS
slower.
Yeah,
that's true.
People say it's a CS:GO clone. I don't agree. I think it actually feels a lot more like a 1.6 clone. You can't really spray, right? It's movement's a lot slower, right? But I will leave you there because I want to be again respectful of your time, and so I will actually put my money where my mouth is. And I had a few more questions I was going to ask you, but I'll let it be for next time. And I was going to say, so obviously you are, in the process of fielding your new Evil Geniuses roster, EG Black, formerly, right now the main roster. Where can people find you? Where can people see your work unfold? I sort of want to let you plug your platforms, dog.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, if you want to stay on top of EGCSGO, then the X handle is at EGCSGO. Maybe we'll change that in the future. You know, CSGO won't be around forever, but at EGCSGO, if you want to stay in tune with what's happening in EG Counter-Strike division. If you want to message me, I've opened DMs and also just kind of follow along with how I post and what I find interesting.
Yeah.
You can find me at valens, VALENS on X as well. Other than that, I mean, man, Dimitri, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me again. I'm sure if you guys have questions or follow-up questions, drop me a DM or post below the links. I'm sure you'll find this posted on socials. Just add questions, tag me, and I'll do my best to answer them.
That's really awesome, man. Thank you so much. And the pleasure is always mine. I have to insist that the pleasure is always mine. We'll do this again soon, hopefully. Not as long as it's actually been. I thought about it the other day. I was like, oh my god, it's been like 2 years or something. Time is like a vortex, right? Like it's crazy. So yeah, we'll talk sooner rather than later. Thank you again for coming on. I will let you go, but have a lovely day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dimitri.
See you, man.
See ya.
Well, chat. Thank you for tuning in. That was so lovely, man. It's always so nice to talk to Soham. He's such a oh man, the guy's a luminary. He's such a lovely dude, and he's just so intelligent. And I just like all I can do is gas him up. I really just I get such pleasure out of talking with him. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, it's gonna be a short one today because it wasn't a particularly long interview. It's just I guess I would say it's sort of the right sized interview. It's sort of a nice, modestly sized interview. But that is going to be it. I will see you guys back next Tuesday for our regularly scheduled programming. And until then, have a great weekend. Enjoy your. Oh wait, what am I saying? What is today? Today's Tuesday. Chat. Today's Tuesday. I'm back on Thursday. What am I saying? What's going on? Oh my god. Oh my god. All right. I woke up too early this morning. Today is Tuesday. I'll be back this Thursday with regularly scheduled programming. I don't know what just happened, man. I was like, it's Thursday today. It is Tuesday. I will be back this Thursday for regular scheduled programming. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. We'll be back with a regular full-length stream on Thursday. Enjoy. Have a good week, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.